growing sense of urgency, indeed. So this is more of a collection of observation rather than sort of a quantitative approach, but a lot has changed in the last 12 to 24 months. We recently marked the 1-year anniversary since the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, a war that's been truly catastrophic. And the accompanying cyber war has done a lot to increase this sense of urgency, and indeed accelerated a lot of plans around particularly protecting critical infrastructure, both in Europe, close to the conflict, but also far away. Many high-profile attacks, such as Colonial, but even last week, for example, ransomware attack on Dole. All of these keep the topic firmly in the headlines. And I think it's safe to say that we have a serious tailwind behind us that just wasn't there even a couple of years back. So regulations, directives, frameworks are all coming thick and fast. Some are good, some maybe not so good, but all of them are having an impact in building this awareness and helping create this discussion. And it looks like they're going to keep coming as well. Ransomware is the plague of our time, hitting everyone. What's key when we talk about ransomware is we know it doesn't have to be specifically directed at OT or ICS to have an impact on production. Many of the attacks have been IT, but caused production to stop. So it also builds a case for this end-to-end cybersecurity and visibility that we'll talk about later is a big part of that. The boards, the shareholders, the management are also starting to pay much closer attention. Again, partly because of this increased awareness in general, partly because of the regulatory environment, and also things like the potential of personal liability is also on their mind as well. At the same time, we've seen big insurance companies backing off the industrial market, primarily out of fear that something like an all-out war accompanied by cyber will bring down the market and they won't be able to pay out. So the concept of transferring a lot of this risk may be off the table in the short term, in the longer term. And lastly, I'm sure that there's a much longer list as well, but lastly, what we have here is the pace of new technology that impacts the industrial space. It continues to gain momentum all the time, right? The intersection of these type of technologies, whether it's IT, OT, IoT, 5G, cloud, and so on and so forth. And whether you're a supporter or you prefer to take these sort of things slower, the pace continues to grow. So here, that's in a very quick overview, some of the things that are creating this sense of urgency. I mentioned regulation is a good thing in some cases, not so good in other cases, depending on the circumstances. How the regulations should look, how they will look, it's probably a topic for another webinar or maybe several webinars. But I think the most important thing to say is that legislators and regulators and the various governmental bodies have woken up to the risk, right? We see everything from the president's executive orders, things like the cyber incident reporting for critical infrastructure that happened not too long ago, the TSA pipeline security directive, CISA's Shields Up program, which is about a year old now, the NCOC projects, and they cover now manufacturing, water, LNG, and the list goes on. And I think it's also important to understand that it's not just in North America, right? The EU has rolled out fundamental directives towards protecting critical infrastructure against potential cybersecurity threats and risks. The NIST directive includes measures to create this high common level of cybersecurity across the EU, but also includes things like resilience of critical entities. So they're directives that work to widen the scope across critical sectors and bring this sort of more unified approach across the EU. But also Australia and other locations. So in Australia, they recently passed legislation and not too long ago published critical infrastructure resilience strategy, which again is about providing a framework for this critical infrastructure. So there's a lot happening. keep in mind that regulations and compliance are not cybersecurity, right? I think the last thing you want to do is wait for the regulation that may or may not come and may or may not make sense to you, and those sort of timeframes, 5 and 10 years until they actually become effective. So I think what we'll see during the rest of this session is the time to start is now. And while it's great that people are waking up to the need, the need really is to focus on the clear and present risks. For me, it always comes back to risk. And putting that risk into your business context, right? Everyone has, everyone's business is different. And many people seem to be under the illusion that the industrial space is closed environment, that it's static, and nothing could really be further from the truth. The people, the processes and technology that we're going to speak about today, they're always in motion. And of course, from the external, the threat landscape is constantly evolving. Malicious actors are improving their methods, taking advantage of a lot of these new technologies. So don't be fooled into thinking that you have time to stand still. The risks are there, they're changing. Now, I don't mean to sound the doom and gloom and, oh no, you should run for the hills, but I think it's important to be aware, particularly when we're looking at the cyber physical risk. It requires a deep understanding of both cyber risk, but also process automation functions and process safety as well. So understanding what assets you have deployed, where they are, and how critical they are to your business is really fundamental in starting this journey and also moving the journey forward.